Shalom, everybody, and thank you for joining me. This is Dion Talley, and this is a special edition in studying with Dion Talley. That's something I just made up, by the way. Anyway, it's a very important topic, by the way. This is a topic dealing with the two witnesses, and there's been a lot of controversy about it. Everybody's got all of these harebrained ideas about it, if they're even dealing with it, and not realizing just how important this is to our narrative. Well, anyway, we're going to get into it and we're going to speak about some things that you probably never heard before. And one of the reasons why you've never heard them before, because most of the time people aren't studying. It's a shame that most of our shepherds have no idea what they're talking about. And I can say that with a lot of confidence because if you watch my series, I don't deal with anything other than the word. No opinion, no filler, no peripheral, just the scriptures, just the facts. So anyway, let's get started. Now we're going to begin with our usual opener, which pretty much sets the foundation for any study that we have because it deals with our current situation, which is the captivity. And this is the prophecy, pretty much the first prophecy given to man after the flood. And Abraham being the father of our nation, Noah and Shem being and Eber, their sons, and all of those, the father of the Hebrews, that was a generation that was of the old world, what they call the antediluvian or post or pre-diluvian world, referring to the deluge. Well, anyway, it says, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them and afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward they shall come out with great substance. This is the cornerstone of our narrative here in America. 400 years, complete affliction, as opposed to the captivity in Egypt, which was 210 years, just total labor. Abraham to Moses was the sojourning, or not to Moses, but to Jacob, I'm sorry. Well, at any rate, this 400 years has left us without a king, without a prince, without a leader. And as we'll see in Hosea, that he told us this. He says, and this is pretty deep too, and this is dealing with the story of Hosea and how the Most High pretty much divorced us during the days of Israel. And he says, go love a woman and her friend, yet an adulteress, according to the love of Yahweh toward the children of Israel. So he was telling him to model his relationship with this adulteress towards the relationship he had, or was the model after the relationship he had with the children of Israel, who looked to other gods and loved flagons of wine. So I bought her to me for 15 pieces of silver. That's what he bought his wife for, Hosea. Well, anyway, he says, let them know that the way that you're going to go through this with this woman who you married, they always say that you can't make a hooker out of a housewife, or a hooker into a housewife, or however that saying goes. Well, anyway, he did this on purpose. And this was to show the pain and the offense that the children of Israel did to the Most High. So it was almost like the parallel to where what I've experienced with you and us being a covenant, like a covenant marriage, and how we violated that covenant. He openly married a woman who was an adulteress for her to do this, so it could bring about the divorce. And it says that And I said unto her, thou shalt abide for me many days, and thou shalt play not the harlot, and thou shalt not be for another man. So I will also be for thee. Then he goes into our narrative. He says, now, for the children of Israel should abide many days without a king, without a prince, and without a sacrifice, and without an image, and without an ephod, and without a teraphim. And afterward the children of Israel shall return, and shall seek Yahweh their Elohim, and David their king. That's another story where David will return, and not the Messiah, but David, and shall fear Yahweh and his goodness in the latter days. But he's not the two witnesses. So anyway, moving on, this is a very deep story, and I encourage anyone to read it because it explains in detail what the Most High felt by Hosea and his wife, and how the Most High pretty much vented all of the grievances he had against the children of Israel and the things that we were doing. Such a descriptive book, 14 chapters, very heavy. Well, anyway, let's move on. Now we're going to go to Zechariah. And Zechariah sets the stage for the two witnesses. And like I said, being 400 years in this captivity, this serious, grievous affliction, we've not had a leader. This is why we don't have any justice. This is why we don't have any peace in our neighborhoods. We don't have any, models to live by. Obama doesn't even come close. Notwithstanding what he did, being the first black president and all of that politics, that has nothing to do with the Most High and the narrative of the children of Israel. He had to fit their criteria for him to be president. And it's as simple as that. It has nothing to do with our narrative or our freedom or any kind of relief that should have came with that presidency. And I don't blame him for it. We're living in the captivity. That's what captivity means. It means that you have no power over yourself. You have no power over the decisions in your life. And it affects your life and your future and your children's future. That's what captivity means. They can do whatever they want with you. Well, anyway, the Most High was setting the stage in Zechariah for these two witnesses. And it says, and the angel talked with me again, came with me again, and waked me, as a man that is wakened out of his sleep. And he said to me, what seest thou? And I said, I have looked, and behold, a candlestick of gold with a bowl on top of it, and his 7 lamps thereon, and 7 pipes to the 7 lamps which are upon the top thereof, and 2 olive trees by it, one on the right side of the bowl and the other on the left side thereof. So I answered and spoke to the angel that talked with me, saying, what are these? He says, my Lord, and that was pretty much a term that you gave to someone who ruled over you, which was your boss or your master, and they said that to people as a term of authority. And the angel talked with me and answered and said to me, knowest not what these be? And I said, no, my Lord. And he answered and spoke unto me, saying, this is the word of the Elohim unto Zerubbabel, saying, not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, saith Yahweh of hosts. He said, who art thou, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel thou shalt become a plain. And Zerubbabel was one of the high priests that the Most High had put in front of the returning Israelites after the Babylonian captivity, which was 70 years, and King Cyrus of Persia let them go. You read about that in the book of Ezra. Anyway, it says that he shall bring forth the headstone thereof with shoutings, crying, grace, grace unto it. Moreover, the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hand shall also finish it, and thou shalt know that Yahweh of hosts hath sent me unto you. For who hath despised the day of small things? For they shall rejoice, and shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel with those 7. They are the eyes of Yahweh, which run to and fro throughout the whole earth. Then answered I and said unto him, well, what do these two olive trees upon the right side of the candlestick and upon the left side? And notice that up here he don't answer him. He said, what are these? He said, oh, you don't know what they are? He said, no. So then he came and he spoke and he got into Zerubbabel. So he kind of didn't speak to him. And he said, and I answered him again. He said, no. I said unto him, what be these two olive trees? Because apparently he didn't answer him after that time either. And he said, what be these two olive trees which through the golden pipes empty the golden oil out of themselves? Now, if you know anything about the menorah and the way that the golden candlesticks and the lamp, you know, the way the oil was and the way that it flowed with the seven golden candlesticks, and to relate spiritually to what you read in Revelation when he talks about the seven golden candlesticks, which are the churches in Asia, he says, which were the lost sheep. That's where the children of Judah, who the Messiah taught and commissioned, that's who they were supposedly going out to teach and declare the gospel to. Well, and anyway, he says, and he answered me and said, no, it's not what these be. And I said, no, my Lord. And he said, these are the two anointed ones that stand by the Elohim of the whole earth. So that's the first glimpse you have of it. So now we're going to go to Daniel. And like I said, we're just going to build the Old Testament references to it. And then we're going to start getting into the specifics. Well, anyway, Daniel chapter 12. So let's go to Daniel chapter 12. And this is the time of the end. And it says at the time of the end, I don't know if you read 11, he goes through all of the different kingdoms and the characteristics of it. Edom, Moab, and the chief children of Ammon. And that right there should tell you right there what's going on in the Middle East. Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the Jordanians, Ammon, Jordan. And those are the only ones that have kings other than Edom. You know what I mean? Those are the monarchies. And if you read Psalms 83, when it talks about the 10 horns or the 10 nations that, decided to erase Israel from the remembrance of the world or the memory of the world, they said that they were done for these children a lot, Moab and Ammon. Well, anyway, chapter 12 gets into after all of those kings, ending with this king that we have now. Excuse me. And it says that he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mount. And if we notice that Trump Tower and his name being on Trump Towers, and the fact that Netanyahu, the president of Israel, just gave Trump, or just named the Golan Heights after Trump, Donald Trump. It's now called Trump Heights. Do your research. The blasphemy and the offense that is to the Most High it's going to be devastating to this man. Well, anyway, this is where we are right now, and it tells you that at the time that, at that time Michael shall stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time that people shall be delivered. Hear that? This is where we get delivered. Everyone that shall be found written in the book. And if you ever read Enoch, Enoch is one of the guys that tells you that there is a book that everybody, in terms of the Most High's genealogy and his children, and those who have, pretty much passed the test, their names are found written in that book. And it says, and many of them that sleep in the dust shall awake, and some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. So that infers the resurrection, which the scriptures clearly tell you will happen. Valley of bones, valley of dry bones, the whole 9 yards. Well, anyway, it says, and they shall be wise, and they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they shall turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. But thou, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. So he's telling them not about technology and all of those things. Remember, there's nothing new under the sun. He's saying that shut up the words of this book, the revelations he showed them in this book, so that the understanding of them wouldn't be revealed until the end. Okay? And that's when the knowledge shall be increased. And he said, and I looked, and behold, there stood other two. Here we go to another reference to the witnesses without saying who they are. The one on this side of the bank, and the other, one on this side of the bank of the river, and the other on that side of the bank of the river. And I'm looking at that as the Atlantic, Europe and America, both sides of the Atlantic, where Satan says that he's going to set up his kingdom in the sides of the north. Well, anyway, he says, one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, that would tell you that it's the Messiah. So one was on one side of the river on land, and one was on the other side, and there was one stand which was upon the waters. And he said, how long shall be the end of these waters? So they asked the Messiah, and I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swear by him to live forever, that it shall be for a time, times and a half, for a time, times and a half. And when we shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, which they've done. Our power has been scattered through the four winds, and all of these things shall be finished. And I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go thy way, Daniel, for thy words are closed up and sealed to the end of the time, to the time of the end. So he's basically telling him that he really can't help him, that this wasn't for his time, that the words were closed up and sealed to the time of the end. Meaning that certain things that he spoke, he didn't even understand them, but they were written for our generations when he said that knowledge shall be increased. And it was for this time, for the time of the end. That's why I'm here now. Not saying that I'm the one that has it all, but I'm one of the elect. And there's a few out here, but not very many of us. And that's a shame, because we all read the same scriptures, but it's the faith. It's the faith about it. None of us don't believe what we read. And that opens the door to revelations when you believe. Because your mind and your intellect don't get in the way. Well, anyway, let's keep going. And he says, many shall be purified, made white, and tried, and many shall do wicked. And none of the wicked shall understand. That's the why I look at a lot of these guys who are Christians and all of these reading the same studies and have no clue what they're talking about. He says, but the wise shall understand. And from the time of the daily sacrifice shall be taken away. And the abomination that maketh desolate set up. There shall be 1,290 days. And blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,335 days. Now go thy way till the end thereof be, for thou shalt rest and shalt stand in thy lap at the end of thy days. Now this is really deep because I really didn't want to get into this, but this has a lot to do with the period before the captivity, that began in South America. And he's basically telling him the 1290 days, which was the days that the Most High had given in Revelation. I'm just giving you short form here of where the Most High had given the woman who had fled from the face of the beast. Historically, that would have been when Christianity was legalized in 325 BC. So if you count 325 BC when Christianity was legalized, and Egypt and Ethiopia were the first nations in in Africa and that part of the world or that hemisphere that adopted Christianity, they fled into West Africa. Whereas we know subsequently they came and took us and carried us to the four corners of the earth in slave ships. Well, anyway, 325, when you add the 1,335 days, you come to around 15th, 16th century. I don't really have the math right there, but you can pretty much in your head understand that. So he's telling you that you're blessed if you live before that and you make it up after that. So anyway, we got a lot to cover, but just giving you a little deep into where most people don't understand what they read. But these words that are in these scriptures, they are not, particularly the prophecies, they are not put there just for words to as window dressing or with no meaning, no specific purpose. Every meaning, every word has a specific meaning, and it's completely crucial to the story. Everything. Most High don't mince words, if you ever heard that expression. Well, anyway, let's keep moving. We're going to go to Malachi 3:1, right? And let's see what that. Now he says, "Behold, I will send my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me. And the Elohim whom ye seek shall suddenly come to his temple. And like I said in the last study, the temple is the land. Just like when he was explaining to David, he told David his house wasn't a building. His house was the land where the people lived, the congregation, like Zion, the way he described Zion, his affectionate for Zion. And the temple, that would be your heart, in the days of the Messiah and the Holy Spirit. So in other words, in this case, he's saying that he's going to come back, suddenly come into his temple, suddenly come back to his land. In that case, because in Isaiah, he talks about Babylon being destroyed for the vengeance of his temple. And Babylon had nothing to do with the destruction of his temple, being the Americans weren't even conceived yet. But it's because of the trampling of the land and the taking over and commandeering his land, which is holy. And it says, now, he shall suddenly come into his temple, even the messenger of the covenant. So he's saying that this messenger is the messenger of the covenant, whom ye delight in. So he's saying that he's going to be cool, and we're going to delight in it. Behold, he shall come, saith Yahweh of hosts. But he says, but who may abide in the day of his coming? Who shall stand when he appeareth? For he is like a refiner's fire, and like fuller's soap. And he shall sit as a refiner and a purifier of silver, and he shall purify the sons of Levi. And we know that Levi and Judah always came together. So that means that they were scattered across the four corners, and seeing the preachers and the leaders and the police and all of the different people of authority that would have come from being and descending of Levi, he's saying he gonna purify them. That's all of us, men, the children of Judah and Levi. And purge them as gold and silver, that they may offer unto Yahweh an offering in righteousness. And then he shall Then shall the offering of Judah and Jerusalem be pleasant unto Yahweh, as in the days of old, as in the former years. And I will come near to you in judgment, and I will be a swift witness against the sorcerers, and against the adulterers, and against the false swearers, and against those that oppress the hireling in his wages, the widow and the fatherless, and that turn aside the stranger from his right, and fear me, and fear not me, saith Yahweh of hosts. And then he gets into this thing here about how we have, with the tithe and the offerings, churches, particularly black churches, with the tithe and the offerings, and where tithing was specifically designed for the children of Israel when they lived in Israel with inheritances. Simple as that. Black people don't have inheritances. We're slaves, born of slaves. So for somebody to get 10% of a poor person to the Most High is an abomination. So you robbed me in tithes and offerings. You're cursed with a curse, even this whole nation. That's some heavy stuff. So let's move on, right? So now we're going to go back to Hosea. Let's go back to Hosea and make that point. Hosea in 6:2. Okay. Now it says, now come and let us return unto Yahweh, for he hath torn and he will heal us. He has smitten and he will bind us up. And after 2 days he will revive us. And in the third day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Then we shall know if we follow on to know Yahweh. His going forth is prepared as the morning, and he shall come up unto us as the rain, as the latter and former rain unto the earth. Now the reason why I brought you there is to show you that it talks about that we were torn and healed, right? He said, now after 2 days, on the third day, he will raise us up. Now, what does that mean? Let's go back to Daniel. Right? Now, I'm going to have to find this one in there. So, let's go to the sanctuary. Right? Now, look at what he says when you think about that. Now it says, getting into this last beast, it tells you that he had a vision, Daniel. And he said he saw this ram that had 2 horns. And the ram was pushing westward, northward, southward, and no beast could stand before him. And I'm just going to skip down. And he said now, and there was nobody that could deliver him out of his hand, and he did according to his will. All right, now he says now, he saw a ram pushing northward, westward, and southward, and there was no beast that could stand before him. And as I was considering, behold, that he goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran into him with the fury of his power. Now, as you keep reading, it tells you that he pretty much rammed the horn, or he rammed the he-goat that had the horn between his head, and pretty much broke him. Now he says, now I saw him that came close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler or anger against him, and he smote the ram and broke his 2 horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him. And he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him. And there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Now the 2 horns, if you know historically, it represents the Medo-Persia Empire. That's the 2 horns, Media and Persia. And this he-goat was Alexander the Great. And it says that And you notice history tells you that when he was killed, or he, in his untimely death, when he died, it says, for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. Well, it tells you when he died, Alexander the Great, his four generals took over. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great. Historically, some argue that's Antiochus, which I would believe because that was a dynasty. And it says that he magnified himself to the prince of the host. Now, if you read about that in the book of Maccabees, it tells you how he sat in the temple and he had the children of Israel worshiping him as God. Well, at any rate, he said he heard one saint speaking and another saint speak. But let's read number 12 first. He said, and the host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. And it cast down the truth to the ground, and it prospered. It practiced and prospered. So he's saying this host, and an host was given him, meaning that he was given people. And the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, meaning the Most High talks about the desolation or the abomination that maketh desolate. That's what he means. By transgression, this sacrifice was cast down, and the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Then he said, I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto a certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? So in other words, he's asking him, how long shall this vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the abomination that maketh desolate, and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? So he's saying, how long are they going to be, desolate and trodden underfoot? The host, meaning us and our people. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So if you understand history, 332 BC is when Alexander the Great, or 323 BC was when Alexander the Great, his untimely death occurred. Then his generals took over. But that's important because the Gentiles was what created the abomination. The fact that Gentiles, unclean heathens, were in the holiest of holies, the temple, the land that the Most High put his name on, that made the table corrupt. And that was precipitated by our turning our back on the Most High and breaking the covenant. Okay, now this was just to specify that these two saints referred to in Daniel chapter 12 are here again. These two, they're speaking to another saint. See these? One saint speaking, and another saint said unto a certain saint which spake. All right? So these two references to the witnesses without saying their name all throughout the Old Testament. That's a second one. And we'll go back for more, but let's just build up the momentum here. Now it says, he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. All right, now let's look at that. This is Alexander the Great. He came in 356 BC, died in 323 BC, commonly known as Alexander the Great. He is the beginning of what is known as the times of the Gentiles. All right, now let's do the math. I don't know if I have my calculator in there, but 323 BC, count down through 2,300 years, as the prophecy says. 2,300 years. Just drop to 23, and just minus 300 years. Bring it to the year zero. 2,000 years left. So that brings us to today. Add the 23 again, that brings you to 223 BC. Or 2023 BC, rather. I know you've probably never heard that before, but those are the facts. This is here in black and white. The scriptures tell you, unto 2,300 days or years, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So we're at 2019 now. And the two witnesses are making that clear. And the one said to him, the other one told him that. These two witnesses. These are the same two olive trees. Same one here. Where one was on one side and one was on the other side. Okay? So that's 2,300 years. And he's telling you where I was reading to you in Hosea. Let's go back to Hosea. Hosea chapter 6. Well, he says, 2 days he will revive us. Remember, a day is like 1,000 years. On the third day, he will raise us up. That's 2,300 years. Just another way he said it. A day is like 1,000 years. And it signifies the Messiah. Remember that? Third day he was raised up. So let's keep going. Let's go to Revelation now. Now we're going to get into more of a detailed reference to who they are. Now it says, and there was given to me, or they was giving me a reed like unto a rod. The weather's changing out here. It gets hot and cold. Got the sniffles. It's nuts. Well, anyway, bear with me, folks. There's a lot of meat in here, a lot of gems for you. And it says, there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel said, rise and measure the temple of Yah, and the altar, and them that worship therein. And by the court which was without the temple leave out, or the outside part of it. Measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles. And the holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months. And I will give power unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. Now that's 3.5 years. And what's so interesting about that prophecy, that let's get it right, 1619, right? 3.5 years, particularly if you're starting at our point where we are this point in the year anyway. That brings you to 323 or 2023. So the 323 BC with Alexander the Great, and the 2,300 years added from Daniel chapter 8. The numbers don't lie. The history don't lie. That's 2023. That's revelation knowledge right there. Well, at any rate, let's keep going. Now he says, now he'll give power unto the two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. And these are the two olive trees. Same two olive trees we read about in Zechariah. And the two candlesticks standing before Yahweh of the earth. Let's go back to that. Let you know that these are talking about the same ones. My mouse is a little sticky here today. Zechariah chapter 4, I believe it is. Right? And he says, These are the two anointed ones that stand by Yahweh of the whole earth. So let's go back to Revelation. These are the two witnesses. Olive trees, two candlesticks. So he gives them two olive trees, the two candlesticks, two witnesses. Two witnesses, two olive trees, two candlesticks. So let you know, this duo, when you hear the word two, they're talking about them. And it's deep, though, because it says, if any man hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth and devoureth their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must be in this manner be killed. Or he must in this manner be killed. So he's saying if you try to hurt him, you got to get burnt up. This is the method. This is the preferred method of the Most High for your demise. And these have the power to shut up heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy. And they have power to over waters to turn them to blood. And to smite the earth with all plagues, as often as they will. And when they have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them and kill them. So he's saying the beast that ascended out of the bottomless pit, which to me has always been the fact that the Roman Empire was dead. And the fact that they're revived in the American, England, and Europe, and Israel Empire, the eagle, and all of the other references to Rome. This is the references to them. They were in the bottomless pit, the Most High destroyed them, and they came back. And it says, and their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt. So wait a minute. These two cities are not the same then. Right? Let me go back. One's a holy city, and one's Sodom and Egypt. There's a discrepancy there, isn't it? Well, the holy city is the West Bank, where Hebron is, Ariel is. I got a video on that in one of my earlier videos. We can get into that. It tells you that when Messiah was crucified, the old city, they called it, that's Sodom and Egypt. That's the Jerusalem. So there was two. There was Jerusalem of the Amorites and Jerusalem of the Jebusites. And you have to know your history, particularly your Old Testament history. With David, when David conquered the city of the Jebusites. That Jerusalem. And made it Hebron. Okay? And just to give you an idea what I'm talking about. Woe to Ariel, Ariel. This is a city that's in Jerusalem right now, or Israel right now, modern day Israel right now. The city where David dwelt. Most High said he's going to stress it. And that prophecy is deep. He said, a multitude of all the nations that fight against Ariel, even that fight against her, and her munition that distress her, shall be as a dream in a night vision. And this is because this is where the two witnesses will be witnessing from, and that they will be killed. Let me get that right. I think they can be killed in the old city. right? And when they're finished, they'll kill it, and their dead body shall not right. So they're going to leave there, the holy city, and they're going to come to the other city where the Al Aqsamas and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and all that crap, and that Jerusalem. That's what he's talking about. And he's saying that their streets, their body's going to lie in the dead street, in the street of that great city. I don't know why I'm skipping over my words here like that. Okay, so that's really heavy. But just to give you the gist of that, that's a whole nother issue. But it fits into the story like you wouldn't believe. Well, anyway, moving on, it says that these two olive trees, these two witnesses, their testimony will be something to behold. And we're going to get into and identify them now. I've kept the intrigue up long enough. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Ezekiel 9. I'm going to go to Ezekiel 9 and I'm going to go back to that. I'm just going to leave you there so you get an idea of what I mean. Now it says, now he had cried, this is Ezekiel speaking, he had cried in my ears with a loud voice, saying, cause them that have charge over the city to draw near, even every man with his destroying weapon in his hand. And behold, 6 men came from the way of the higher gate, which lieth towards the north, and every man a slaughter weapon in his hand. And one man was clothed with linen. And then linen again, with a writer's inkhorn by his side. And they went in and stood beside the brazen altar. This was in the temple. And the glory of Yahweh of Israel was gone up from the cherub, whereupon he was, to the threshold of the house. And he called to the man clothed with linen, which had the writer's inkhorn by his side, which means that this guy's a writer. And Yahweh said unto him, go through the midst of the city and through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of men that sigh and cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. And to the others he said in mine hearing, go ye after them through the city and smite, and let not your eyes spare, neither have pity. Slay utterly the old and young, both maids and little children and women, but come not near any man upon whom the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. This was judgment on us. Then they began at the ancient men which were before the house. And he said unto them, defile the house, and fill the courts with the slain. Go ye forth. And when ye went ye forth, and slew in the city. And it came to pass, while they were slaying them, I was left, that I fell upon my face, and cried, and said, O Yahweh Elohim, wilt thou destroy all the residue of Israel in thy pouring out of thy fury upon Jerusalem? Then said he unto me, the iniquity of the house of Israel and Judah is exceeding great, and in the land full of blood, and the city full of perverseness. For they say, Yahweh hath forsaken the earth, and Yahweh seeth not. And as for me, mine eyes shall not spare, neither will I have pity, because I will recompense their way upon their head. And behold, the man clothed with linen, which had the inkhorn by his side. You notice they got to keep reminding you, this guy has the inkhorn. Reported the matter, saying, I have done this as thou hast commanded me. Wow. So let's go on. And I looked, behold, the firmament was above the cherubims. There appeared over them as it were sapphire stone, and as the appearance of the likeness of a throne. And he stood there upon the man, and he spoke to the man clothed with linen, and said, go in between the wheels, even under the cherub, and fill thine hand with coals of fire between the cherubim, and scatter them over the city. And he went in my sight. And now the cherubim stood on the right hand of the house, And when the man went in, a cloud filled the inner court. Then the glory of Yahweh went out from the cherub and stood over the threshold of the house. And the house was filled with the cloud, and the court was filled with the brightness of Yah's glory. All right? And it came to pass that when he had commanded the man clothed with linen, saying, take the fire from between the wheels, from between the cherubims, then he went in and stood beside the wheels. This is a spiritual thing in terms of what went on and what the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy of Holies looked like. And Enoch went in there, and I guess this was the Most High bringing judgment to the people he has once covenanted to. Okay? And he said, and one cherub stretched forth his hand between the cherubims, and unto the fire that was between the cherubs, and took thereof, and put it into the hands of him that was clothed with linen. And he took it, and he went out. And it appeared in the cherubim the form of a man's hand under the wings. Now I'm just going to keep going down there, because this is when Ezekiel sees a UFO. Because that's what it is. It's a flying ship. Anyway, let's keep moving. So now we're going to go to more references to where I want to go to another thing to describe the inkhorn. Now the inkhorn, tell you why that reference to an inkhorn is important. Now this is the book of Enoch. Enoch is the man who wrote everything. He said, the blessing of Enoch, which he had blessed the elect and the righteous who would be present on the day of tribulation at the time of the removal of all the wicked. And Enoch, blessed and righteous man of Yahweh, took up his parable while his eyes were open, and he saw. And this is a holy vision from the heavens, which the angel showed me, and heard them from everything, and I understood. And I looked not for this generation, but for a distant one that is coming. This is the one far off, way beyond the one he lived in. I speak about the elect ones and concerning them. Well, the Messiah talks about the elect ones in our generation, Revelation. And I took up the parable, saying, Yahweh of the universe, great, the holy and great one, will come forth from his dwelling. And from there he will march upon Mount Sinai, which is amazing to me because Mount Sinai wasn't even thought of when Enoch was living. Sinai is named after the Sinites, children of Canaan. Remember, the Most High gave the children of Israel the land of Canaan. So this is named after the Sinites. Excuse me. And appear in his camp, emerging from heaven with a mighty power. And it says, and everyone shall be afraid, and the watchers shall quiver, and great fear and trembling shall seize them until the ends of the earth. And mountains and high places shall fall down and be frightened, and high hills shall be made low, and they shall melt like the honeycomb before the flame. All right? So this is a little bit of how, but I wanted to get into how he talks about who he is. He said he will arrive with 10,000. You read this paralleled in the book of Jude, New Testament. 10 millions of his holy ones in order to execute judgment upon all. We got to a little of that in the last video. Well, anyway, tells you who he is. All right? Now, first, let me give you an act, because Enoch doesn't really talk about himself. So let's go to Moses, and Moses tell you who he is. It's the book of Jubilees. Jubilees tells you who he is. Okay, let's go to Enoch. right? Okay. Now it says here, now Jubilees, as you explained in other videos, that every 49 years, 7 weeks, or 7 Sabbaths times 7 years, 49, the 50th year being the Jubilee year. And so time is recorded in Jubilee or 50-year increments. And it says in the 10th Jubilee, Mahalalel took him a wife, Dinah, the daughter of Barakil. And it just gives you the genealogy to Jared. And for in his days, the angels of Yahweh descended on the earth, those who were named the Watchers, that they should instruct the children of men, and that they should do judgment and uprightness on the earth. But except that didn't happen. They came down and started mating with them. And that's why Enoch was born, to judge them. As you'll read, if you ever picked up the book of Jubilees. Anyway, it says, and she bare him a son in the 5th week, and in the 4th year of the Jubilee, and called his name Enoch. And he called his name Enoch. And he was the first among men that are born on the earth who learned writing, hence the inkhorn, and knowledge and wisdom, and who wrote down the signs of heavens according to the order of the months in the book, that men might know the seasons of the years according to their order of their separate months. And it says, now he was also the first to write a testimony, and he testified to the sons of men among the generations of the earth. And he recounted the weeks of the Jubilees, and made known to them the days of the years, and set in order the months, and recounted the Shabbats, or the Sabbaths of years, as we made them known to him, as we made them known to him. And what was and what will be, he saw in a vision of his sleep, as it will happen to the children of men throughout their generations until the day of judgment. It says he saw and understood everything, and he wrote his testimony, and placed the testimony on earth for all the children of men and for their generations. So Noah kept his testimony and brought it upon the ark, and preserved it throughout the flood. And it was preserved and kept in the library of the Hebrews all the way up until the book of Maccabees, when they started, after that, Gentiles started burning and destroying our works and our history. So let's get into his. Now it tells you here that he recounted everything. That's the reason why it says it. That's the reason why I'm coming here, rather, is he says that he wrote a testimony and testified the sons of men among the generations, recounted the weeks and jubilees, and made to them the days and the years, right? And he says that, and it will be, he saw what will be, what was and what will be, as it will happen to the children of men throughout their generations until the day of judgment. So if he wrote down this, what was and what will be, all the way up into the judgment, let's go to it, because we're trying to get to the two witnesses. All right? So let's get to the two witnesses. All right? Here's one of them. I'm established that Enoch is one of them. And he's going to give you an account of them. Okay? Okay. Now, all right, before I get into the narrative, let's start with what this parable is about. I have to go back. He goes through, which is the most remarkable thing I've ever read in my life. I will tell you that right now. He went through the history of the world using parables. I think it begins down here. We begin it down here, 12 winds and the gates, the four directions. I mean, he gets into everything. Now, then he said to me, Enoch, look at the tables of heaven. Read what is written upon them and understand each element on them one by one. So I looked at the tablets of heaven, and read all the writing on them, and came to understand everything. I read the book and all the deeds of humanity and all the children of flesh upon the earth for all the generations of the world. That's a lot of reading. And at that very moment, I blessed the great Yahweh, the King of splendor forever, for he created all the phenomena in the world. And I praised Yahweh because of his patience, and I wept on account of the children of the people on the earth. And after that I said, blessed is the man who dies righteous and upright, against whom no record of oppression has been written, and who received no judgment on that day. Then the 7 holy ones brought me to and placed me on the ground in front of the gate of my house, and said, make everything known to your son Methuselah, and show all your children that no one of the flesh can be just, before Yahweh, for they are all merely his own creation. That's deep too. We shall let you stay with your son for 1 year, so that you may teach your children another law and write it down for them, and give them all a warning. And in the 2nd year you shall be taken away from among them. Let your heart be strong, for the upright shall announce righteousness to the upright, and the righteous one shall rejoice with the righteous ones and congratulate each other. Now he says, for the sinners shall die together with the sinners, and the apostate shall sink together with the apostate. Really, really deep. Now I want you to get into the parables. I was just a little. Now he goes into the vision of deluge. That's the flood. He gives you now here it goes. Now it says, now this is a vision of the various cows. And he starts it out where the cows each represent a spiritual being. The cows represented the fallen angels, and the lambs represented the sheep, and the lambs and goats represented the people, or in this case, the children of Israel. And you can pretty much get an understanding of who he is, but I'm not going to read the whole parable, but it tells you in terms of metaphors and illustrations and animals like they have in nursery rhymes. It's kind of like that, but way more graphic. Now it tells him that he has a dream, and the first cow that came quieted her, and at this moment she bore 2 white cows, snow white cows. And after it she bore many cows as well as dark heifers. And I also saw in the sleep the snow white bull. He grew big likewise and became a snow white bull. And there proceeded forth from him many snow white cows that resembled him. For they began to give birth to many snow white cows which resembled them, and each one following many others. And he said, now I saw in my vision with my own eyes as I was sleeping, and saw a lofty heaven. And as I looked, a star fell from heaven, but it managed to rise and eat and be pastured among those cows. This is a reference to the days of Jared, which we just read about with Enoch and his father, where the sons of men came down, the watchers came down, and he says that they will star fell. So that means that they were kicked out of heaven. They fall, you fall. So he fell down from heaven, like they said Lucifer did, and he was managed to eat and be pastured among the cows. Then I saw these big dark cows, and behold, they all changed their cattle sheds and their pastures and their calves, and they began to lament with each other. And once again I observed the sky, and behold, I saw many stars descending and casting themselves down the sky upon that first star, and they became bovid among these cows, and were pastured together with them in their midst. And I kept observing to all of them extending their sexual organs like horses, and commenced to mount the heifers and the bovids, and the latter all became pregnant and bore elephants and camels and donkeys. This was the giants. So the cattle became fearful and frightened of those, and began to bite with their teeth and swallow and gore with their horns. So anyway, that's just giving you a little glimpse of what he's talking about in terms of the first mankind and the first generation on earth. when it came to Adam and his descendants, and Cain and his descendants, and how the angels and the watchers mixed with them and had daughters from them, or had giants from their daughters, rather. So we're going to skip down because he goes through the whole thing. The punishment of the fallen angels, the great flood, from the flood to the Exodus. And I mean, the detail is just amazing. From the Exodus to the land of the Canaan, and he mentions us as sheep. And like I said, I encourage everyone to read this because this tells you the history of the world. Everything, from the beginning to the end, in a parable, which is, to me, amazing. Only the Most High could do something like this. And now this is from the Judges to the building of the temple. And the two kingdoms of Israel, the destruction of Jerusalem. So they're going all the way down to history, from the destruction of Jerusalem to the return from exile. From the return of exile to the beginning of the Hellenistic period. That's the Gentile period. Hellenistic is Greek period. They added that. All right? From Alexander the Great to the Greco-Syrian domination. From the Greco-Syrian domination is Maccabees and Antiochus when they took over. And it says, this is here from the righteous Maccabean to the establishment of the Messianic kingdom. All right? So, this is judgment. So let's go back. I just wanted to catch the last part. Now it says, picking up where we can, he said, now after this I saw 37 shepherds who were pasturing the sheep. All of them completed their duties in their own respective periods. Now these were people after we went into captivity. These were the spirits or the rulers who were over us. And it kind of gives you an understanding of that connection to the fallen angels and the hierarchy of angels that were given rulership over us. And he says, now, like the former ones, and aliens took the sheep into their hands. See that? Now he says, all of them completed their duties in their own respective periods, like the former ones. And he says, and aliens took them over. So now we were in charge or taken over or ruled over by aliens, which is basically someone, in this case, from another land. And aliens took the sheep into their hands in order to pasture them in their own respective periods, each shepherd in his own period. And I saw with my own eyes all the birds of heaven, eagles, vultures, kites, ravens, coming. Now these are all unclean birds. Kites, vultures, eagles, these are all predatory. Vultures, very nasty, hateful birds. And the eagles were the ones who were leading all of the birds. They were that eagles. Remember that? The Roman Empire and the symbol of their nation and their, that's the mantra they used. The flight of an eagle and the wise owl and that whole thing. And they began to eat those sheep and to dig out their eyes and eat their flesh. Then the sheep cried aloud, for their flesh was being eaten by the birds. This is when the captivity began. Okay, we're going to stop here, and I'm going to continue this in part 2. We'll get into more of this, and it gets so interesting from here because it identifies both of them and the things that they'll be going through in the 3.5-year period. It says that the two witnesses will have their testimony. But this gives you the clarity. So anyway, we'll see you in part 2.